Welcome to another episode of your favorite show, kids. It's Don't Believe Jack. Don't believe Jack. Kids, don't believe Jack. Don't believe Jack. Including your parents and teachers, don't believe Jack. Chaos is a ladder, don't believe Jack. Burn down institutions, don't believe Jack. That's what I'm trying to teach kids. Don't believe Jack. And most importantly, don't believe Jack. Me. That's me, Jack Michelle. What's shaking, baby? I'm here. I'm doing it. And I'm having fun at the same time. Don't believe Jack. Can you tell that I never really don't believe Jack? I didn't make it very large. Don't believe Jack. Music class. Don't believe Jack. I was terrible at the don't believe Jack. Recorder. Don't believe Jack. I think I just made up a new genre. I don't believe Jack. I feel like I'm making a Drake song. There's like a hook, and then there's just talking. There's just sentiment and emotion flying at you, and it's broken up into undigestible sections by a hook. That's every Drake song, and don't I love it? Oh man, I was listening. My favorite song to listen to is one of my favorite songs is "Blem" by Drake. Oh, it's so good. Blem. I can listen to that song and repeat. It's amazing. It's amazing. Yeah, I don't know. Um, well, don't believe Jack. Okay. Anyways, what did I want to talk about? We're gonna make this another short episode because I think it's been fun when it's been short and sweet, like all of my relationships. And this podcast is what they all have in common, ladies. Yeah, I'm here. I'm doing it. I was gonna record this podcast episode about an hour ago, and I was supposed to be out the door because I wanted to go to the Los Angeles Museum of the Holocaust, and I actually really do want to get there. So I'm gonna keep it short for that reason as well. But I was derailed because a friend asked me what I thought about this guy. Apparently, this guy on on SNL has said some very let's just say rude things. He said some bad things about Asian people that are pretty like racist, just frankly, and and uh, and I guess the Atlantic is covering it that this guy Shane Gillis, who's been hired for the show, uh, has a history of making these like racist remarks. And on an episode, he just was saying, he like mocked the way that Asian people speak, um, and yeah, I mean, it just seems like a very like politically incorrect guy. Um, I think it's an interesting question about, my friend was asking me, right? I'm Asian, he's Asian. We were talking about, what I thought of it, and I was telling him that I don't think it's particularly good, but it doesn't really matter. Like, would I want to work with him? Would I want to talk with him? Probably not. I don't think it might not be an enjoyable experience. Um, but I mean, I wouldn't want to work with him. But there's a lot of people that I in this world that I wouldn't want to work with. So I mean, I think the most important question, really, and I think on all these social issues, I don't know. I have conversations with people, and it's like I don't think it's really matters what I think. I think it's what matters is understanding what's going to happen and why it's going to happen. So I think I have very concrete ideas about that. Um, I have some pretty concrete ideas about what will happen based on prior experience. Basically, Lorne Michaels won't fire him. Through channels, he'll be pushed to make an apology. Uh, and Lorne may have already decided that he's just not going to renew the guy's contract after a year. But we'll see. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. Maybe he'll renew the guy's contract, right? That's sort of up to Lorne, and Lorne Michaels tends to keep all this stuff very much close to the chest, right? An example is that when what's her name was on SNL, I forget what her name is. And this person was on SNL. Who is on SNL? Jenny Slate. Jenny Slate said fuck on her first time she was on SNL as a player, and she apparently Lorne never said anything to her, but at the end of the year her 1-year contract was not renewed. So all the writers, my understanding is that all the players and all the writers on SNL, or at least maybe like young ones, maybe writers get multi-year. I think head writers get multi-year contracts, maybe, right? But at least initial writers and players, they get 1-year contracts, and so that's pretty much the game. Like, Lorne isn't necessarily going to fire you; he's just not going to rehire you after a year. So Lorne may have already decided, like, this guy's too much trouble, and he may have made a decision right as the season is getting started. He's like, yeah, the guy's contract is not getting renewed. Or he's going to say, let it ride. But the thing, based on history again, this isn't based, right? I think it's important that when we look at these issues, and I guess what I'm saying is when I look at issues like this, I try not to really be theoretical anymore. I try to be a little bit more like concrete. And it's like, okay, well, what has Lorne Michaels done in the past? Okay, well, what Lorne Michaels has done in the past with people where there's problems is he doesn't say anything, the person makes an apology, and then either at the end of the year their contract gets renewed or not. That's all it is. It's just like a business decision for him. And I'm sure he's weighing in the blowback and the coverage. But here's the other thing that I also said to my friend. So I think that that's what Lorne Michaels is gonna do. But I also think that I'm not sure. Like, right? I mean, this is the bigger point, which is that. So that's I think is what's going to happen regarding Gillis. Now, why would Lorne Michaels hire someone like this, right? Like, people are like outraged and they're like, I can't believe, why would SNL hire someone like this? And I have a theory about that. Now, this is a theory, but it's also based on, like, I think my observations of comedy, participating in it as well, which is that I think Michaels is going to stay quiet because ultimately comedy and SNL is about pushing boundaries, right? Like, the reason Lorne Michaels has a general practice of staying quiet about issues like this is because SNL is in the controversy business, right? That's he doesn't. It's weird because simultaneously SNL has to be in the controversy of business, but they also don't know where the line on controversy is. They just don't know, right? That's part of what makes it fun and entertaining. What I was saying is I try to focus, instead of focusing on the way I think about it is, instead of trying to inject morality into the marketplace, I try to think about what is the morality of the marketplace, because there is a morality that, like, bubbles up from inside of it, and with a show like SNL, we're the morality, the viewers. The media, ideally the viewers, not even the media. We're the moral compass of the show, right? But there's a weird thing about us as viewers. We go to shows like SNL, we go to comedy we go for morality, but we also go not for morality. right? Like, I guess what I'm trying to say about that is, um, let's put it this way: if you think about this as a market, right? Um, SNL is a product that's just it's risky. It's a risky and edgy and offensive product, right? Like the way I'd put it is this is a business, and what Lorne created back in what, like the 70s, I don't know, was basically a product that was provocative and edgy, and we all loved it. We loved it so much that it stayed on the air and it's become an institution. But to stay relevant, this institution has to do what it's always done, which is be edgy and relevant. And to do that, it's going to do the same thing that it did in 1970, which is hire funny and irresponsible people. That's like the fundamental core of the show. Like that's what SNL has always been about, right? That's what comedy has always been about in a lot of ways. It's just like it's funny, it's offensive, it's niche, it's or not usually niche. It's sort of broad actually, and it's just controversial, right? But the thing is, if it's too controversial, we all tune out of the show, and we say we don't want any more, and then the show doesn't do well. But if the show isn't edgy enough as well, we don't care, we don't find it interesting, and we tune out for that reason too. So it can get tuned out for being too offensive, and it can get tuned out for being too inoffensive. It's too boring. Like I don't know. I mean, people want to make it seem like it's a morality thing, right? Like, why can't they just be proper? And it's like, no, I don't know. Is Bustle proper? Is Huffington Post proper? Is The Root? No. Like, these are media companies that are also banking on being edgy, which is connected to being relevant, which is connected to getting readers and making money. And so, I think the thing is, it makes sense to me in some level why Lorne would hire someone like this, because he's got to. He's got to hire, he's got to create a controversial show. It's like having if you look at sports is like really interesting, right? I told my friend about this analogy I'd use about Christian Laettner at Duke. I saw this documentary about Christian Laettner, and one of his teammates basically said, the thing about Christian Laettner is he was just a fiery player, just full of energy, right? And the thing that's weird about fire is you need it. You need it to keep you alive. It keeps you warm, it cooks your food, it gives you light, right? But it can also burn your entire house down. But we don't get rid of fire, right? Like, we're like, we got to figure out how to manage the fire. And apparently, right, over the course of the documentary, they made the point of saying Coach K knew how to manage the fire. He knew how to manage the fire that was Christian Laettner. And I think Lorne does the same thing. I think all comedians do the same thing, right? It's a fire. You're saying exactly what you think. You're saying offensive, potentially offensive, edgy, honest things. Honest things aren't always pretty. People want to hear them, though. We've got this weird conflict, right, when we think about comedy, which is we both want people to be honest, but we also want people to not be hurtful. And I would say those are both difficult ends of the comedy spectrum, but they're also part of what makes comedy interesting. How do I combine those two things? Being like, I want to be honest, but I also want to be civilized, right? The point is, like, if you want to just be civilized, you could go to like an opera house. People don't do that. Why? Because opera's not relevant. Opera's not different. It doesn't distinguish itself. And so that's basically like, I mean, people get angry about Chappelle, people get angry about this or that. It's like, don't you get it, right? Like, this is comedy. Like, I'm not saying comedy, I mean, I'm sure someone would say to me in a conversation, the next thing they'd say to me is, oh, well, are you basically saying that, like, anything that's as racist, that's maximum racist is okay? I'm not saying that. I'm saying that when we consume comedy, we are consuming this mixed thing. We like and seek out the fact that it's edgy, right? Democracy has the potential to produce people like Barack Obama as well as Donald Trump. It's just, that's like, we find the system legitimate. And I think we've got to understand that we don't just buy the parts we like. right, of comedy. When I say I like comedy, it's like I don't just buy the parts I like. I buy the whole thing. Does it mean that like someone saying something really offensive should get a TV show? I don't know, but I will say that like people shouldn't be shocked that this raw, authentic, provocative, boundary pushing thing sometimes makes people angry. Right? Like, and sometimes this boundary pushing thing happens to push boundaries. Like, yeah, right? And it can push boundaries in a good way. I remember it was amazing for me when I remember the first time. I mean, the reason I'm interested in comedy, I've always been interested in comedy, is because I remember when I was 16 and I saw Bring the Pain with Chris Rock. And I was like, oh my God, the things that this guy's talking about are crazy. This is so refreshing and so exciting. The way he's putting a target on black people, that's a weird thing to say. The way he's putting a target on white people, the way he's putting a target on America is incredible. And that made a lot of people angry, but it also opened up certain conversations nationally. It made me feel like things that were going on in my life that I was afraid to talk about were relevant and mattered. It sort of empowered me in a weird way. Now, it also limited me, right? Because a lot of his comedy is misogynistic, right? Or it's sexist. And then so I think, oh, well, I should emulate those sexist parts. And it's like, well, I don't know. Is the sexist part legitimate? Is he right in how men and women relate? Or is he projecting or layering something onto it? That is a continuing debate in my life. And I think it's a continuing debate in our society, right? Like, essentially, he's saying at its core, like, a lot of his premises are basically like women like money and they like security and they basically, will drop a loving guy if he doesn't provide for them. I'm not sure that he's wrong about that necessarily. I'm also not sure that he's right, and I know he's not right in all cases, but I also know he's not wrong in all cases, right? That's what we're going to comedy for. So, like, there are going to be some mistakes. And if you ever did comedy, or if you ever wrote publicly about anything, or if you're a journalist or in the media, that's part of the game. That doesn't mean to excuse everything that people do, but you got to take the good with the bad, right? The fire cooks all the food in your house, keeps you safe, keeps animals away, right? But it can also kill you. So how do you balance the two? And I think that's no one wants to talk about comedy in that way. Right? Like, I've been at open mics where, people will say things like, people will say, like, oh, that was so sexist. And then they'll get on stage and they'll be like, men are friggin' idiots, right? They'll be like, oh, that was so offensive to me. And then they'll come out and be like, men are fucking retards. And I'm like, what? Okay, well, you just said something that was super against disabled people. And also, you just categorized all men as just idiots, right? Like, yeah, you have a feeling you want to express, and I can respect that. But you have to be able, I can respect you being honest and expressing yourself, even though I consider it a distortion of reality. If it's funny, I'll laugh. One thing, yeah, if it's funny, I'll laugh, and if it's not funny, I won't. And it's not because I'm sexist, right? Like, I think some of the stuff, I forget what her name is. I think she's just hilarious. This Chicago comedian, like, she goes into some gender stuff, but she's just funny. She's just a frigging funny person. And she has strong views on gender, and I forget what her name is. I'm trying to pull her up. Candy, forget what her name is. I'm blanking on her name right now. But anyways, like, she's just so funny, and like, and she says things that are like criticizing guys, but I'm just like, yeah, it's hilarious, right? So, like, if you want to be able to, it's like free speech. It's like, you got to express yourself. I'm going to express myself. hopefully we don't get into some kind of, and this is one thing I've definitely realized for myself, is if I feel like I'm being trolled, I want to counter troll, which is stupid. And it's stupid because, first of all, it's socially destructive. But more importantly, and this is really important, it's actually taking me away from my honesty, right? If the goal of comedy is to bring this authentic perspective, then if I get involved in some kind of war with someone and some kind of push and pull, I'm actually losing a sense of who I am and how I feel, right? Like I could get so caught up in a debate about gender that I forget that actually no, I really want to support women, right? Like I can just totally lose track of that if it becomes this zero sum game. And so I don't like to engage in people who have that zero sum attitude because it brings that out in me. It's like if you're around competitive people, it's like, well, now I got to be competitive and an asshole to sort of hang with you. But anyways, that's a little bit of a digression, but I'm just saying, yeah, it's like, what do you want? That's if comedy is going to be forward and it's going to talk about relevant things in the world, that's probably going to piss some people off. And that's not to say that you don't have a right to be pissed off. Like it was funny. Like my friend asked me, okay, so like, well, what do you think? And I'm like, well, I mean, personally, I think it's perfectly fine to write a letter to NBC or to ask for this guy to be fired or to organize a Facebook protest. Like that's fine. You can do that. Like I don't even and on a level like me as an Asian person, I'm like, yeah, I actually would probably support that. But the problem is as a comic and as a person who cares about like as a comic primarily, but also like maybe as like a person thinking of like some other perspectives or thinking about this maybe a little bit as a lawyer, this balance, like are we gonna damage the system in some way? Then it's like, yeah, I gotta let this guy speak. Especially as a comic, like I really don't know. I told my friend, I was like, I probably would need to give it a few days of thinking about it to see how I feel. But as an Asian person or as an individual, it's like, yeah, you're totally within your right to go and do it, but just think about it, right? Like think through the actions and the consequences, I guess is what I would say. I'm not one of those people, comics, whatever. I don't even know if I'm a comic anymore, right? But I'm not one of those people that says you're not allowed to protest something, right? Or you're not allowed to call for a comic to be fired. I just think before you do that, consider the big picture and then still make a decision. Like you may say, like, yeah, speech is fine, but I don't want to endorse that. I think that that's perfectly reasonable. But I'd also say, don't be caught flat-footed. Don't be like shocked that Lorne Michaels, like what I just said. I think that's probably how Lorne Michaels thinks. I mean, that's how I realize that's a good way to think of as a comedian. It's like, oh, this is a balance. This is a balancing act. I can't make it all safe. And I can't make it all offensive. Right? I have to make it authentic, but and that authenticity, I can heighten the provocative aspects of things I want to authentically say to get laughs and get attention. But I can't just be all provocation, just empty, devoid of comedy, devoid of any kind of authenticity. Right? So it's just a balance, like a lot of things. And that's that. And and on one hand, we can be like, it's deplorable that things work this way. But on the other hand, it's what we demand, and it's actually in some ways what progress looks like. Like we love, right? Well, one of the reasons, if I said I do comedy, people are like, oh, that's so cool, because the idea is they think about comedy being progress, but it's like, and it is progress, because it gives voice to people who are voiceless, right? I mean, I guess you could say, but like, I could say that, maybe someone in Sean Gillis's, perspective, admittedly, it's like, look, okay, do guys who look like him people who look like him do not run Fortune 500 companies. He's a little tubby, but you know what I mean? Like, does a white man, do they still control a lot of Fortune 500 companies? Absolutely, right? But like, he's got this perspective. He's provocative. He's trying to come up in the Philadelphia comedy scene. He feels like there's no love for white males. I don't know. Like, is he entirely wrong? I mean, there's a part of me that's like, yeah, maybe. But at the same time, I've been in like the open mic or show scene, and it's basically like, yeah, if you don't say this thing that's liberal, like people are like, what the hell's wrong with you, right? Or they'll be like, oh, that's anti-black, right? Or that's anti like progressive, or that's anti-women, And I want to pull away from those people. I don't want to continue those conversations. So in that regard, I can relate. I don't know. It's very complicated. But I guess the overall, I'd say, just think about what you're buying. You're not just buying the things you like. You're buying the platform, which says things you like sometimes and says things you don't like sometimes. You know, like, I'm sure a lot of white people would be like, what Chris Rock is saying about white people is so unfair. You know, and I would be like, no, it's not. And I'm glad he's saying it. So I don't know. I don't know. Anyways, that's enough out of me. And hopefully this is the last time I ever talk about the politics of comedy. God damn. I'll see you later. Merry Christmas.